All right, and welcome to the Atlanta Landlord Luncheon. My name is Matt Martin. I'm here with Chris Littleton with PMI Georgia. We also have Chip Cagle at Longhorn Investments at Hobnob Tavern today. And so just wanted to welcome you back to the Atlanta Landlord Luncheon. So our goal is once a month we meet both online and in person to be able to bring you investment education, excellent speakers, networking opportunities, and education to help you build long-term wealth in real estate. You're welcome to follow us on Facebook, LinkedIn, and we're also on YouTube. You can just search for the Atlanta Landlord Luncheon, and it should pull up our videos. We have some great speakers. We've had some great speakers in the past, but next month we'll have Rich Monroe, who is with Diamond Edge Properties, and he manages short-term rentals. He also coaches other investors in how to self-manage short-term rentals. And there's also been a lot of negative legislation or local municipalities cracking down on short-term rentals. So he'll be an exciting speaker to have next month to update you all on what's happening with that and how you can succeed. But it seems like things are starting to turn around in the short-term market. But today we're going to be talking about House Bill 399 that just went into effect on July 1st. Georgia's really cracking down on out-of-state landlords. So Chris and I will be talking this month to help educate owners, especially out-of-state investors in the Georgia market. But before I do, I want to share a little bit about PMI Georgia and how we can help you, and then we'll switch over to Chip. So hold on one second, Chip. Let me pull up our. There we go. Oops, next one. There we go. Okay, so at PMI Georgia, started Chris and Donna Littleton about 20 years ago. They started as real estate investors themselves. They were selling turnkey rentals, and those investors had challenges with other property managers and said, "Hey, we're not gonna buy any more from you unless you agree to manage them for us." And so they were like, I guess we're in the rental management business now. And so been doing that for 20 years. 23 years. Wow. Yep. That they have seen and done it all, and have grown quite a business here, located down in Tyrone, next to Peachtree City, but manage all of Metro Atlanta and even through Middle Georgia. Have a great team on staff. So we're happy to talk with you about managing your investment properties. We do long-term unfurnished rentals and do a great job of maximizing your income, your cash flow, while also minimizing your risk. And there are a lot of risks. So, Chris, you want to give a short intro about yourself?
I'm an associate broker here at the firm. My wife is the broker of record, and it's a as you can see, it's a family-owned business, and like I said, we started off being real estate investors, and and then we started selling some of our properties off, and then people were not happy with management, and so we got into the management business, and for the longest, we would only manage a property if we sold you the property, and we changed that model quite a while back, so we're helping out investors from all over the world as well. So we've got out of state, out of country investors. So we can help you stay in compliance with that if you're looking for a good property management company here in Georgia. Also, I've over the years handled just about every kind of structure that you could think of, when it comes to structuring deals and acquiring properties. So we have a great acquisition team that can help you when you're ready to buy or even sell, do those 1031 exchanges and move, into a different property or even into a different state as well. So we're hoping you're moving to Georgia because Georgia's got very landlord friendly laws, and we've always, out of the hundreds of investors I manage for, and a lot of them are out of state, they always say they do the best in Georgia. We have very landlord friendly laws, and so it's been a long time since we've seen a lot of legislation come through and changes, and we're seeing more and more changes. I think they're trying to clean up some of the hiccups that they've been dealing with for years. So it's interesting to see this current legislation changes come through. And the game changed quite a bit too. Now you have a lot more hedge funds, and people are putting more money into real estate, so they want to hold those individuals a little bit more accountable for what we call the tenant landlord laws here in Georgia. But I'm telling you, we got a great team, and I'd love to help you out if you're buying, selling, or even managing the properties. We'd love to see you here at PMI Georgia, and hopefully you can get something out of what we're talking about today to help you in your business. Because I always say, bad landlords create legislation. And that's what we're here talking about
Right,
today.
right,
So,
absolutely.
So be a good landlord.
Yeah.
So
there's a number of ways you can reach out to us. Our information is on the screen there, but the easiest thing to do is just go to PMIGeorgia.com. You can fill out a request form either for rental analysis or a consult. You can book a call directly with me through the Calendly link. You can also just call the office directly, and there's our number listed below, 678-782-1004. But we would love to connect with you to find out more about your property and how we can help you. But for now, I'm going to shift over to Chip Cagle, who is at our in-person event with Longhorn Investments, and he's at the Hobnob Tavern.
Hey everybody. Chip Cagle, Longhorn Investments. Longhorn is a hard money lender out of Dallas, Texas, but I'm right here in Atlanta to help you out for your Georgia needs. But I can also help you in all the other 9 states that Longhorn does business. We'd love to talk to you about that. What is Longhorn? We do fix and flip loans and new construction loans. So on the fix and flip side, we can do 100% of your purchase and rehab. That's of your costs, up to 70% of the appraised ARV. So that's 70% of your loan to value. We can even go up to 75% if you're thinking about keeping it as a rental property. And to do that, to prove that, you've got to get a rental refinance pre-approval, and that's not too hard for me to get for you. So then we do that extra 5% because we know that if you did refinance it, we'd get paid off. All right, so the new construction loan, we do 90% of your costs, your lot purchase and your construction costs. If you already own the lot, then you can use what you paid for it towards the 10% down payment on the construction costs. So then maybe you end up getting it for 100% of your construction costs. So as you can see, my information is at the top of this, 04-216-5599, or you can email me at ccagle@longhorninvestments.com. But let me tell you about a couple of exciting offers we got going on this summer. One of them is we're doing, you can choose your discount. Do you want lower points or lower interest rate? So you would get, if you wanted the points, it would be a half point less than usual. If you wanted an interest rate, it would be 1% less than usual. And the time where you would decide which one you want would be if it's going to take you less than 6 months, then the points would be a better option. If it's going to take you more than 6 months, we have a 9-month loan. If it's going to take you more than 6 months, then you probably want to choose the interest rate. Because 1% is an annual number, and half of that is a 0.5%, which would compare exactly even to the 0.5 point difference. All right, so here's a real exciting one, fast track to loyalty. So if you're brand new with Longhorn, or maybe you've just gotten 1 or 2 loans so far, then you could use loans that you've gotten with other lenders for fix and flip projects in the last 2 years. And we would count those towards our customer loyalty program. Customer loyalty program is 1 point less and 2% less interest. So that'd be a really big deal if you could jump right in on your first loan with us with those better rates. So you can give me a call to talk about that too. Now, if you close a loan with me during the summer between Memorial Day and Labor Day, then I'll give you a $100 gift card to Longhorn Steakhouse. Now, there's no relation between the 2 Longhorns, just the same great name. And lastly, you can send me referrals. If you send me a referral, you'll get at least $500. But if the the person gets a loan for more than 200,000, then you get more than $500. So you see, I've got on the sheet up there that if 200,000, it would be exactly or less. It'd be $500. But 300,000 would be $750. 400,000 would be $1,000. And if you got $1 million loan, which we don't do a lot of those, but if you did, then it'd be $2,500. All right. So more information, go to longhorninvestments.com. If you're ready to put in an application or want a pre-approval, then go to chipcagle.flowify.com/apply-now. Now it's going to show you a sample of our cash to close statement. So let's say you're buying a property for $200,000 and you're going to put $50,000 into it. If your ARV is $350,000 in the 70% column, then it would be a little bit short of 100%. You'd have a little down payment, $5,000. But if I got you that pre-approval I was talking about for the rental refinance, then you would be back to the 100%. And you see I've got it in yellow there. There would be no down payment. And so what would your cash to close be? You'd have points of 2.99. Now this isn't taking into account the summer special. So it would be lower than that with the summer sizzle special that we've got going on. Lender fees, insurance is just an estimate. Closing costs is just an estimate. Those two are hard for me to predict because I don't know who you're going to be using. Some are more expensive than others. And then lastly, you would have the prepaid interest, and that's just interest for the remainder of the current month. I've defaulted it to 15 days, assuming that you're closing in the middle of the month. So the total cash to close is $13,000, less than $300. And so compare that to other lenders that need a 10% down payment on your purchase price. It's going to be in most cases, it should be more than the $13,000. On this one, this particular deal right here, your down payment would have been $20,000 with other lenders that need 10% of the purchase price. So again, give me a call. We'll talk about this and get you going on your first fix and flip loan with us. And enjoy what Matt and Chris have to talk about today.
All right. Thank you so much, Chip. And again, if y'all are interested in more information, feel free to reach out to Chip. He's happy to connect with you online through that. So, well, good. Well, let's go ahead and start diving in for our topic today. So, Chris, there's every July 1st, there's a slate of new laws that go into place. Last year, we saw probably 4 new laws that affected property management. Some habitability things. There's a new squatter law that was very helpful for us. There's been some positive things and also some compliance things. That if you're going to file an eviction, you have to post an inconspicuous notice on the tenant's door. So we've been, working over the past year to, get into compliance on these new laws. And lo and behold, July 1st came around this year, and we have a new law, which seems like a pretty massive shakeup for out-of-state investors. And so I do want to dive into that, the reasons behind the law, what it looks like to get compliant if this law impacts you and your investment properties. So let's jump into it. So what is this new law?
The House Bill 399, and there's a few different sections that they're addressing, and basically they're trying to clean up out-of-state investors. There are even some issues with in-state investors about how their properties are going to be managed. They're looking for more of a professional type management using brokers and especially if you're an out-of-state investor, But they've also got some fail-safes in there, I think, that work very well too. Because in Section 1, Title 36, this is covering local governments. Okay, the maintains that no local government can investigate or inspect a property without probable cause of a code violation. So when laws like this happen, they try to swing that pendulum over, and they're, and a lot of local governments may be trying to get rid of what they call rental properties. And So they don't want over enforcement. So, they're saying they can't go into your property without probable cause. So that's a good thing.
Right.
So let's be if everything's running smoothly,
Right.
there doesn't need to be a shakeup. Cannot require the registration of residential rental properties as well. And there's quite a few cities that are trying to require landlords to register their rental properties, and basically this law saying that they cannot require that, even with short-term rentals, because there it is, it's a short-term rental.
Right.
So they're saying that you're not required to register your rental properties with the cities or municipalities or counties and things like that. If such a property is managed by a real estate licensee, the tenant must provide. So we're going into the next step. If the code enforcement agent shows up, if such property is managed by a real estate licensee, the tenant must provide a code enforcement officer operating with probable cause. There you go. It's got to be probable cause. It has to be something that's bringing them to the property, other than the fact they think it's a rental property. The name of the licensee, licensee's number, and contact information of the real estate licensee.
Right.
So, and generally, in that case, so you'll know if you're in a property management broker, a broker is required for a licensee.
Yeah.
A licensee cannot manage a property without a broker, but a broker can have designated licensees, which will operate under their license. So ultimately, they can provide the information for the licensee, but the broker is going to be responsible for that.
Yeah. And just to clear up confusion, because I know people have started calling about this new law and asking, in order to be a property manager in Georgia, you have to be a licensed broker. So there's not like brokers and property managers. There are brokers who do property management, but not all brokers do property management. So, but in order to be a property manager in Georgia, you have to be a licensed real estate broker.
Yeah, and there's a lot to that too, because then rent checks and income and expenses may all flow to what we call a trust or an escrow account for the brokerage, and the only person responsible for that can be a broker, not their licensee either.
Right.
So there's a lot of licensees out there. They're trying to get into property management, and they're not informing their broker, and that's a big no.
Right. Right. All right. Well, let's jump into the big crux of House Bill 399 and how it impacts out-of-state investors.
Yeah, Section 2, Title 44, out-of-state landlords must use a licensed Georgia broker to manage residential real estate rental properties, that is a single-family home residence or a duplex. Okay, so they're saying if you have a triplex or quadplex, you may fall under some of the other owner exemptions. But if not, if it's a single-family home or a duplex, you have to use a broker.
Yes. Yeah. So for all out-of-state investors who have one single family, two single family, six single family, or duplex, they're now required by law to use an in-state broker.
Right. And if the broker does not reside in Georgia, the broker must employ at least one person residing in the state to be responsible for handling tenants' communication. That person would need to be in compliance with Chapter 40 and 43, which means they would need to be, they would have to hold their license under that broker.
Right. Yeah. So in order to perform real estate services for another person, you must be a licensed agent in the state of Georgia. So we're really seeing kind of a return to, I don't know if it's a return, but Georgia really cracking down on who can be performing real estate services for other people, and specifically for out-of-state investors operating single-family residences. This is it's not an anti-business crackdown. It's really, I think a lot of it comes down to tenant protections. And so let's talk a little bit about that. Where did this bill come from? What do you think is the reason for the legislators wanting to enact this legislation?
Well, there's been a lot of landlords that are using what they call management softwares. They own properties in maybe in multiple states, and and so what's happening is they may not be in compliance. There's a lot of other compliance issues for owners. Like if you own more than 4 properties, if the tenants are paying rent, you must have that trust account where the rent lands, and you must, or and it needs to be registered with the real estate commission, or you need to be bonded, and that's a compliance issue. So, and then you have the out-of-state investors or owners using these services, and they're not complying with their security deposit rules. They're not complying with their rent rules, and they're certainly not complying with the maintaining of the properties and communications rules.
And they're not staying up on Georgia landlord tenant law, right?
Yeah.
Another thing I see as investors, not even just investors, a lot of times we refer to them as accidental investors. It's people who've relocated, maybe they moved out of state and they just wanted to rent their property out themselves. So they just went on ChatGPT and said, "Hey, draw me up, a lease, and they rent the property to this person." ChatGPT can't be sued, right? ChatGPT can't go to court filing an eviction for you. And let me tell you, when the judge sees the lease, it's going to be very hard to enforce a lease that doesn't comply with Georgia landlord tenant law. And so for a number of years, we've had landlords trying to get away with putting repairs back on the tenant, not maintaining their property, allowing people to live in blighted properties. And so I think there's a lot more of local municipalities and legislators wanting to support tenants and make sure that, hey, we have these laws in place. We need to make sure that people who operate single family rentals, duplex rentals are actually abiding by the law. So they're not jamming up the courts.
And reside in Georgia, the state of Georgia, where you can get held accountable as an individual if you're living in the state.
Right.
And also, real estate's regulated on the state level. So there's what applies in Georgia may not necessarily apply in other states.
Right.
Or maybe, Georgia's is pretty landlord friendly. Some other states are more tenant friendly, where you have a lot more requirements. And, and even these calls are even need to be enforced with the larger hedge funds that are coming into our market as well. They have to comply with having a broker now as well. So there's a lot of issues.
Yeah. So. Real estate laws vary so much from state to state, and they change all the time. And if you're not in the business, if you're not staying up on the latest legislation, then you wouldn't be in compliance because you wouldn't even know it. Like last year, we saw, it's no longer legal to collect anything more than 2 months security deposit. Know, and there have been plenty of other, in the past, you could collect as much as you want if you thought it was a risky tenant and still wanted to place them.
They're not happy with that, charging more than double the security deposit, and just because because you use that as a safety net, but also you may be using that as a way to get more money out of you times when it's time to move out.
Right.
But there's a whole lot of issues that, I always say if they're not getting qualified, you shouldn't move them in. You should manage with the intent to succeed, not manage and set something up for someone to fail. If you know that person's not qualified, it's kind of like predatory lending. It's predatory leasing, and you really shouldn't. You shouldn't do that.
Right.
So, but also, this is one thing too. The out-of-state landlords cannot claim exemptions for licensees as a full-time employee of or community association providing management for such services. So there's two things there. It used to be exempt is you could have a full-time employee and they could manage your property as long as they live as long as you had a full-time employee in Georgia. they can manage the property. That's off the table now. They have to be a broker. So
They have to be licensed.
They have to be licensed. Well, this is to start off. They can be licensed, but the broker has to agree to it.
Right. Yeah.
And the next one was the community association providing management services. There's a license out there for CAM employees, and they're managing like HOAs and stuff like that. They don't have the same ability to negotiate like a licensed broker or a licensed salesperson in Georgia. They're not, so they're only supposed to manage it. Well, there's a few of these CAM associations that were managing properties inside of a community that they're maybe managing. Now, if they're going to manage those properties, they actually have to have a real estate license.
Right.
So that they're not, the CAM employees can no longer manage the properties.
Absolutely.
So, and I would say that there's Section 3 of the Title 43, additional exemptions to license requirements. Like we touched upon a family member of the owner, they could manage. That's off the table now. No more family members. If they drive to the side in Georgia, can manage a property on your behalf. That used to be you could have a direct family member manage your property. Officer of the LLC, an officer of the LLC can no longer manage the property if they're in your what we call the operating agreement, or if you're in a corporation, they're an officer of the corporation. They can no longer manage those properties. The corporation or the LLC would have to engage a broker. Residential and non-residential, the employee of the owner, unless owner is
prospective purchaser.
Prospective purchaser. I'm having a moment here. But that means that if you're engaging in buying a property, you can still have an employee or a family member help you buy a property. That's totally different. And you can still use them to buy property, but after you buy the property, that the owner of the property, the company can no longer, or that employee can no longer manage it. It has to be managed by an agent or the broker. So an employee of a community association performing any license triggering activity other than community management. We covered that in the bullet point up above, but there's a lot of CAM guys out there that think that they can manage properties, and they've been doing it for a while. And there's a lot of things that trigger that license requirement. One would be creating a lease and signing. Two would be negotiating that lease, and so that means even on the front end, they can't say, "Hey, the rent's going to be this, your deposit's going to be this." That's off the table. No longer can they do that, and they certainly can't collect rent, and they can't enforce the lease.
Right.
And that means anybody that's enforcing the lease or collecting rent or signing leases or negotiating leases on behalf of that property would have to be licensed.
Right.
I don't think you can get any clearer than that.
Right.
So.
Well, yeah. So just to back out a little bit here, so some of the reasons behind this law are tenant protections. A lot of bad landlords, people misbehaving, taking advantage of tenants, and legislators wanting to crack down on and ensure that people are actually following the law when it comes to renting properties out to tenants. And just the general lack of knowledge that an out-of-state landlord would have regarding Georgia landlord-tenant laws, right? Let's talk about how this could be enforced. What are some issues that might come up for a landlord who wasn't aware of this law? that is now in effect. So how do you think this will impact out-of-state owners who aren't in compliance with this?
Well, I can tell you that when we talked about the requirements for local and city governments on the front end, if you're doing good business and things are running smooth, you're not going to probably have any headaches. I would definitely think that you would need to be in compliance, because as soon as you want to do a lease renewal, you should be using a broker. Whenever you want to do or you have a late paying tenant, you'd want to use a broker, and you want to be in compliance with collecting those funds. If you had issues with your code enforcement, they're if you're an out of state owner, and it could not go well for you. I would say that typically what you're going to see, if you're not in compliance, you're probably going to see rent abatement. Okay, if you're not in compliance with repairs, and communications, you're going to see rent abatement, and you're going to be forced to do those repairs. So rent abatement's a big one. If you're not in compliance with your escrow funds and your security deposits, you're going to see what they call triple damages. You'll see the state award the tenant their original security deposit plus 3 times the damages. So you're quadrupling your liability if you're not in compliance with these issues. And so that's a big issue. And that security deposit issue really comes into play at the end of your lease, the time frame to do your move out inspection, the time frame for you to reconcile the damages and the account, and return the tenant's money. Those are all things that are going to be key factors, and that can get expensive. And so, because if you don't comply with those time frames, you may not be able to apply the damages to the properties or pass due rents to your security deposit, and the whole security deposit plus 3 times that amount would go to the tenant. So those are some of the things that you're going to see, and a judge is not going to have any sympathy for you if you're not using a broker.
Right. Yeah. So I think probably for most out-of-state owners, this may not impact them if everything runs smoothly. But as you and I know,
they don't.
When things go wrong, they go really wrong, and you're gonna need the help of the courts to get things figured out. And if the judge sees that you're not in compliance with this new law, your case is pretty much over.
Well, I would call it in the tenant grapevine. They heard it through the grapevine. There's going to be great opportunities for them to not be in compliance with some code issues, so that they can report this to the landlord. If we have this issue with tenants that don't pay, often they won't cut the grass, or they'll leave trash out in their front yard, or even, or they're just looking for a code violation, and so that and then the code enforcement officer shows up, and then now under this law, if they show up, the tenant is responsible for giving the code enforcement officer your information.
Right.
So but if they don't get that information, and the court, they sent out a notice and a summons to court, and this goes unchecked, you can get, and then they find out that the tenant that you weren't in compliance. That kind of actually helps you when they put it back on the tenant. The tenant's required to give you your information. But if they don't have it and they give it to the tenant's not. They're not. When you get that information, you're going to be subject to some serious fines. Probably rent abatement's probably going to be the biggest thing, and probably maximum fines for the violations you're dealing with, like not cutting the grass. You know, those ordinances for not cutting your grass, because some of those ordinances can also go to $100 a day for not cutting the grass.
Right.
So when we get a notice to not cut grass, or the trash is in the yard, or the house needs painting, or whatever it is, we contact our owners right away so that we can avoid that any kind of rent abatement, or we can avoid any kind of fines from the city. We want to address those issues quite as quickly as possible. But if you got a lease out there and the tenant doesn't even have your contact information on the lease, which you should provide on the lease, and so they give them the lease, they have no way of contacting you if you get ugly with.
Right, absolutely. And we call them landlord rescues when landlords call us up and they have created a nightmare scenario, and all of a sudden they want our help. They didn't want our help before because we were either too expensive in their mind, or they thought we didn't know what we were doing. They knew better, and then all of a sudden they're in a situation where they have a non-paying tenant. They're trying to get an eviction process, and all of a sudden they want our help. And so the challenge with that is not very many property managers are willing to take on a landlord rescue, because we typically get paid on rent collected.
Yes.
And it's a lot of work to process an eviction. It's a lot of work having to start communication with a tenant who is not happy, having to go to court. That's time, that's money. Nobody works for free in any business. There are no free lunches, and so it really behooves owners to get ahead of this new law and not to wait until there is an issue that's on fire that really needs to be addressed quickly, because you're losing money. That's really hard for our property managers to jump into. They're also very busy, and it can be very stressful. And when you have a tenant yelling at you, and an owner who's stressed out because they're not getting any income coming in to pay their bills. So this is definitely one of those things that if you were a smart landlord, start identifying an in-state broker now. PMI Georgia would be a great company to engage, because we cover a wide area and we do a great job. But this is definitely something you want to get resolved, I would say, by the end of the year, so that you can make sure you're in full compliance with this new law.
Yeah, because there's other issues too with, I'm just saying, if you own multiple properties and not having your rent checks in an escrow account, or you're not bonded, that can be a heavy fine as well. So just but there's a whole slew of issues that, hey, I'll just manage it myself. It seems to be pretty easy. I'll just bring tenants. There's issues with fair credit reporting that you need to be aware of. There's just a whole host of issues that you can go down the wrong rabbit hole. We've had owners that have screened tenants that were criminals.
Yes.
And they sublease the property out, and then you have these people paying the criminal, and the criminal's not paying the landlord.
Right. Yeah. Leasing fraud is at an all-time high. Atlanta ranks number one in the nation right now for leasing fraud. And one typical scam is somebody will steal somebody else's identity to lease a property, and they may pay first or second month's rent up front. The landlord may be very excited about this tenant paying money up front, and then all of a sudden the rent checks stop coming in. They can't get in contact with the tenant anymore. And really what that tenant is doing is that they're turning around and subletting, renting out the room, whatever it is. And they know it's just a matter of time before an eviction gets processed, and they'll long be gone because they've collected their cash. But they've burned somebody else's credit, somebody else's identity, and then also the landlord is out that rent. And then there's going to be repairs that are going to need to be made on their property, and there's no one to hold accountable for those repairs, for that rehab. So,
and also you have tenants that may have been paying rent that sublease the property,
right?
And now And now that they are going to be coming after you as well if
Right.
they have to show up for.
Yeah.
So it's just and things get messy,
Mhm.
so we check on these things all the time.
Right, absolutely. And that's one of the advantages, I think, of having been in the business for 20 years is that, we're constantly evolving, iterating, developing new processes and procedures to prevent fraud, to better screen tenants. I'm always amazed when people call us up and they say their property manager is like 3 or 4 months behind on collecting rent. Because
Who's your property manager? Well, it's my brother.
Our job is to collect rent. Like I think it's pretty self-explanatory. I always get a chuckle out of that. But yeah, our job is to collect rent for you. Period. That's what we do. We handle the accounting. Of course, we handle the maintenance and repairs, and then the enforcement of the lease too. And that's not simple either. So if the tenant decides they want to paint the entire living room pink, or make modifications to your property, there needs to be some language in the lease that we can enforce that helps correct that situation if it happens, or prevent it from happening to the beginning.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I can see also issues with like maintenance and repairs. Air conditioning goes up. You have that new 5-day rule for with the new laws is like, you need to be compliant in 5 days. You need to make sure you have all the work set up and all that. Well, if you don't have a broker that's managing that correctly, if you go to court, you're going to get fined for not having a landlord, for not having a broker in the state, and then you're going to get fined rent payment as well. So I mean, there's just and then they're going to do what they call a stop-o letter, make sure that you come into compliance.
Right. So there's a lot of ways that we can save them time and money just by making sure that their rental is in compliance. And last time I checked, most people get into real estate investing is they want to make money, right? They want to make money. Believe it or not, there's a lot of people that don't make money in this business. And that's our job, is to help you make money.
To avoid the self-inflicted wounds.
Yes.
Good screening processes. Don't let them in if they can't pay the rent. Avoid all this. I mean, I was like, if you got a good tenant, 1 month security deposits, it should be fine.
Right.
You want to make sure that you put somebody in that can afford the rent.
Right.
Then once they get in, you want to set the expectations and make sure everything's working and fixed properly, so they have a good house to live in. That's why that one law was passed about making sure that the owners do their repairs. And if you don't do your repairs in a timely manner, usually what happens is the tenant stops paying rent, and you're going to file on them. And when you go to court, usually the judge doesn't say, "Hey, we're not here about the repairs. We're here about the rent."
Right.
But nowadays, more and more, you hear the judge that says, "Well, I'll listen to you about the repairs, but we're here about not paying rent." Okay.
Right.
So and then the next step sometimes is self-help. If the tenant is filed and not paying the rent, they can make the repairs themselves and then take it out of the rent, and then you're going before the judge. The tenant's going to wait for the judge to make that decision. And the one thing you do not want to do is make the judge make those decisions for you. If tenant's not paying the rent, has absolutely nothing to do with the repairs. Whatever you have, the house should be repaired, and you should move forward with the eviction sometimes. But a lot of out-of-state owners weren't making repairs. Thus, the tenant stops paying. And the answer to the court is, well, the landlord's not living up to their end of the bargain. And that's when you get into this rent abatement. Right. And you can get into fines too for breaking the law.
Right.
So.
And there is just a lot, there are a lot of tenant advocacy groups out, and they share language about habitability. So they want tenants to know their rights. And so, once, tenants do talk and they share. And so we also see, tenants prey on unsuspecting landlords. They get rejected by big property management companies because they don't pass their qualifications or screening. So they go on Canva, they update their pay stubs to make it look like they earn more, things like that. And there's a lot of unsuspecting landlords that just don't have the tools to screen and protect themselves. And so, because we see this every day, we are able to, put measures in place to help protect you from, from being taken advantage of by tenants, because that happens too.
But also, in-state landlords, once you have 4 or more real estate properties that you own, the compliance rules start chasing you down as well.
Yeah.
The judge, can start fining you for not being in compliance with such things as your security deposits and stuff like that. Very rarely would I see them dig into that, but they would dig into it if they see neglect.
Right.
So.
Right. Absolutely. Well, good. Well, let's go ahead and start wrapping it up for today. Thank you guys for joining with us. I'm going to bring Chip back in. Chip, any final comments or questions on the topic?
No, I just want to encourage everybody to come in August to the meeting and hear Rich Monroe. He has a lot to say about short-term rental projects, Airbnb, and other avenues. And he not only does he have his own, but he will help you with yours and run yours. So great guy to have on your team. He advocates for the short-term rental community, has a couple of different nonprofits that work on that, tries to keep up with what the local ordinances are, and tries to get them to be fair for the renters, for the owners. Let's put it that way. All right. So let's see, what is the date on that one? You have that handy real quick?
1 second.
I got it the 18th. So
Okay.
August 18th. And you could, if you're in Atlanta, you can come to this live meeting at Hobnob Tavern. It's a great place. They have some good food, and they recently added a lunch menu, so it's more affordable now than it used to be if you've come to a meeting before. Love to see you here in person. It's a good place.
All right. Absolutely. Thank you, Chip. And again, if you want to reach out to us at PMI Georgia, you can go to our website, pmigeorgia.com. You can request a free rental analysis. I would love to take a look at your property. There's a lot we can do online through Zoom and phone, but we can definitely talk about how to get your property in compliance with the new laws. And
if you're looking for some real estate, I'd be happy to talk to you about that, give you some advice, maybe move you in that direction as well.
Yes.
I mean, just recently, in this week, we had one of our investors close on a property, and we moved it under to management. It's a beautiful property, and so there's opportunity out there. There's always opportunity.
Right, absolutely. Yeah, there's definitely, we're entering into a little bit of a buyer's market. So there are deals out there for investors, but there is a difference between a cheap deal and a good deal. So we would love to talk with you
we'll help
about
you evaluate that property on the front end before you purchase it.
Absolutely. So feel free to reach out to me again. It's matt@pmiga.com. You can email me, or you can give us a call. But thank you guys for joining us today, and we will see you next month in August to talk about short-term rentals with Rich Monroe. All right.
Thanks, Matt and Chris. Great presentation.
All right.